Hello, Shelter Rock Church. Pastor Steve here. And we are at that incredible season. We are just 1 week away from Christmas Day. And it's a time that we often have our minds drift back to events that made a past Christmas special. Well, while I was studying to be a pastor and going to seminary, one of the ways that I prepared for my ministry was volunteering every week at a nursing home. I led a service every Sunday afternoon. And I will never forget the response of one of the senior citizens listening to my sermon. It was like the Sunday right before Christmas, and I was kind of a one-man show. I would lead them in songs, and then I would teach, and then I would greet them all. Well, we had just finished singing O Little Town of Bethlehem. And after we had finished singing, I, now a seminary-educated communicator, I thought I would inform them something that they probably didn't know. I said, the word Bethlehem that we just sang in that little song, O Little Town of Bethlehem, it's actually a conjunction of two Hebrew words, bet meaning house, and lahem, meaning bread. So Bethlehem means house of bread. And at the time that David was a shepherd boy in Bethlehem, it was actually a place that Jerusalem would grow much of its bread or wheat in preparation for the baking of bread. Anyway, there was this woman sitting in the very front, and she said, "Is that right? That Bethlehem means house of bread?" Her eyes were big and wide. And then she said, "You mean the one who is the bread of life was born in the house of bread?" And I said, I guess I never thought of it that way. But what always stuck in my mind was her big, wide eyes captivated that Bethlehem meant house of bread, and that Jesus was the bread of life. Have you ever thought in your own journey of your sense of wonder when you came to Christmas? Because I think we often lose it. So I have here a present. Now, when you get a present like this, as an adult, you think, oh, maybe this is an umbrella. We don't get excited like we used to. But if you could go back to when you are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and you have a present under the tree, and it's just sitting there, and maybe you got up before the rest of your family did on Christmas morning, and you see your name is on it, and then you pick it up. How heavy is it? And then you shake it a little bit, and you're anticipating, you're thinking, you're dreaming, you're in a sense of wonder as to what this might be. I fear that many of us have lost that sense of wonder in regards to Christmas. When somebody tells you a story, Bethlehem means the house of bread, it is not your eyes that go, wow, Jesus, the bread of life, born in the house of bread. We hold our presents and we're like, it's another present. I wonder if anyone got me anything creative. I have here a small nativity set in front of me. And in this, you see Mary holding the little baby Jesus. Now, for us, it's a fixture of this time of year. We see it. We're kind of used to it. But could you approach this day, 1 week before Christmas, with a spirit of wonder about what this baby represents, and how the spirit of what we see in Christmas exemplified in this baby could mean all the difference in how we approach life? We have been in a series, The Way of the Kingdom. And during this Advent series, we've looked at the way of joy, the way of peace, the way of hope. Today, we're going to look at the way of love, and how the love that we have received from God is something that we can in turn give to others. Before we open our Bibles, could you open your heart in prayer with me? Father, I thank you that we have a few minutes today to glorify your Son, because this Christmas, as we once again approach this special day, we are praying that we would regain a sense of wonder of to all the possibilities that your love for us exemplifies, and that as we follow the way of the kingdom, we will show the same kind of love to others. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So if I could take you back in time to a day in which these magi from the east are approaching Jerusalem because they've been following a star, but they don't know exactly where they're to go from this point on. They know they are seeking the one who was born King of the Jews. And so they inquire of this dominant figure in Jerusalem, Herod the Great. And so Herod initiates an investigation. This is all recorded in Matthew chapter 2, as to where this one to come, this King of the Jews, was to be born. Now, interestingly enough, the Jewish community knew for the last 700 years where this child was to be born, because it was a prophecy found in the book of Micah. And so it is there that we come to our journey of a prophecy that relates directly to the coming of Messiah. And I hope that this prophecy will inspire in you and I a sense of wonder. So here's where the prophecy is found. The book of Micah, chapter 5, and we're going to look at the first 5 verses. So we start with this kind of military motif. Chapter 5, verse 1, "Marshal your troops now, city of troops, for a siege is laid against us. They will strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. But you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, though you are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come for me one who will be ruler over Israel, whose origins are from old, from ancient times. Therefore, Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son, and the rest of his brothers return to join the Israelites. He will stand and shepherd his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they will live securely, for then his greatness will reach to the ends of the earth, and he will be our peace." Now, I know many of you, if not most of you, have heard a little bit of this prophecy, but you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, out of you a child will be born. And that is the exact passage that these scholars told the Magi, so they knew to go to Bethlehem. But I want you to now see the context of this passage. Jerusalem, according to verse 1, is under siege. In other words, back in the time of the Assyrian Empire, this gigantic empire is surrounding this small city-state of Jerusalem. It looks hopeless, and they're probably waiting on a word from a prophet. And what they want that word to be is, God is coming with his army, and he's going to deliver you. And the word that they get is, God is going to allow a little baby to be born in this insignificant community called Bethlehem. It's not the answer they wanted, and yet this baby to be born will be transformational. Now, here's where I want to, again, capture a little bit of the sense of the wonder. Because if you think of the baby of Bethlehem, what you think of is weakness, frailty. I mean, what difference is this baby going to make? And yet we find out in this passage that this baby comes from the Ancient of Days to the vanishing point, as the Hebrew would put it, and that he's going to be a ruler, and that his rule will be noted by him standing as a shepherd. It'll be noted that this man will have strength of the Lord and the splendor of the name of the Lord. So that anticipates in us something wonderful. Now, you might ask this question, how does this relate to the love of God or how we exemplify love to others? Because after all, today is the way of love. Did you know that Micah the prophet, his name actually means who is like the Lord, or who is like Yahweh? And in the very end of this book, chapter 7, verse 18, he says this, that God or Yahweh is like one who has unfailing love. And what we're seeing in chapter 5 is the unfolding of what that unfailing love looks like. So chapter 5, verse 4 is where I really want to look at these attributes of this one to come, the baby to be born in Bethlehem, and what will his qualities be? So the first one, chapter 5, verse 4 mentions is that he will stand as a shepherd of his people. Now that image of standing as a shepherd does convey that it's probably like a coronation. In other words, this is a king. Now, if you were Jewish at the time that Micah gave this prophecy, and you heard about one to be born in Bethlehem, everyone's mind would be think of the most famous person who was ever born in Bethlehem. Do you know who that is? That's David, son of Jesse. You see, it was Bethlehem's favorite son. In fact, every quality of this person to come shows similar qualities of David, with the difference being that the one to come has David's qualities par excellence. In other words, while David was a very frail man who did become king, this one to come has those same qualities except in perfection. And the first one, that he's going to be a shepherd. Now, what does that make you think of when you think of a shepherd? For me, I think of my nativity set here, and here's an example of Joseph, but you see Joseph has a staff, and I think of a very docile person like this, watching his sheep and, just taking care of business, making sure none of them run away. But it's funny that David himself gives us the picture of what a divine shepherd looks like. You probably know these words. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He leads me by quiet waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I go through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. What we observe, very simply, in this perfect picture that David himself tells us of what the Lord is like as a shepherd, is somebody who has our back. He's looking after us. He's providing for us, and we can rest there no matter what may happen. I have shared with various people that Michelle and I are in this new venture in life. And many of you have heard that we're going to be moving to Nevada. Michelle's moving on January 17th, and I'll be moving sometime after Easter. But in this journey, I feel like I'm graduating from college. In other words, I'm young enough where I want to get a job. I want to serve in ministry, but I don't know what God has in store. I just don't know. And so, truth be told, I'm a little nervous how it's going to unfold, but I am always getting the sense that God's my shepherd. He has my back. Let me give you an example. Just about a month ago, I was preaching in Nevada, in this small town called Boulder City. I was asked to preach by a local pastor, and while I was there, this was November 13th, I preached my little heart out at their 2 services. Not a big church, about 100 people. And then a few days later, I fly home with all kinds of question marks. Lord, what do you have in store for me? Where will I find the right place for me to serve? On the Thursday after that Sunday, I receive a phone call from the pastor who hosted me. He said something to the effect, Pastor Steve, I'm approaching 75. I'm approaching a time of retirement. And those who I work with at the church thought, after hearing you on Sunday, that maybe you would be a good person to replace me as pastor of this church. Wow. An unsolicited phone call with a potential job opportunity to be a pastor at this church. I don't know at this point whether this is God's divine hand or whether this is just an opening for me to consider along with other openings. I don't know. But you know what it communicated to me immediately? God has this. He's my shepherd. And because of him, I lack nothing. He leads me by quiet waters. He restores my soul. I look at all these pictures and I see in this baby of Bethlehem a spirit of wonder that I can anticipate great things from a great God as I begin a new adventure in life. Which brings me now to the next line in verse 4. It's this. It's having the strength of the Lord. So this baby to be born in Bethlehem, the least of the clans, will have the strength of the Lord. What does that mean, to have the strength of the Lord? Now, once again, David exemplifies a picture of what this looks like. If we went back to 1 Samuel chapter 30, and David is running around with his fighting men. He's living in the Philistine area, and he's taking on these various mercenary tasks. Well, he leads his fighting men, a group of a little over 500 people, on this journey to attack something and bring, hopefully, restoration to a community. But when they come back to Ziklag, their home, you see smoke coming up. And everybody's spouse and children has just been taken captive. Now, David's men, who have been very faithful to him through thick and thin, turn and look at David and say, you need to die. Because you led us away to go on this little battle while our own home has now been in question. And we may never see our spouses. We may never see our children again. And here's the phrase that we read in 1 Samuel chapter 30. David found strength in the Lord. What does that mean? It means that we have, through this one to be born in Bethlehem, the means in a dark situation to regain confidence, to regain strength. It is found in that child of Bethlehem. It is found in the one to be born in the least of all the clans. I know you have challenges. I have challenges. It's just a part of life. But I also know that God gives us an inner strength, and it doesn't come from us. It comes from God himself. David found strength in the Lord, and so do we. The third thing I want you to see in verse 4, we've seen standing as a shepherd in the strength of the Lord. And then we read this, in the splendor or majesty of his name. So where is my strength? Where is my hope? In the splendor of the majesty of his name. Here it is. It's another David passage. Do you remember in 1 Samuel chapter 17, David, the small young man, comes before Goliath, this giant of the Philistines. And this is what David says to the giant. You come to me with the javelin, sword, and spear. But I come to you in the name of the Lord. This is the way Proverbs describes it in Proverbs chapter 18, where the writer says, the name of the Lord is a strong fortress. It is this idea that if the Lord has placed his stamp upon it, we are under his provision. We are under his protection. And I look back and I'm like, that gives me confidence. That gives me strength to know that if God has placed his stamp of approval, this is all I need. Now, I go back to the context of this passage. Jerusalem is surrounded by the largest empire in the known world at the time, the Assyrians. It looks hopeless. And what they want to hear is God's coming in victory with a big army that's coming. And the word that Micah gives us is actually the victory is going to be far more long-reaching than this temporary battle. Now, as history recalls, and Isaiah reports it, they will actually win that battle through the hand of the Lord. But the long-range prophecy is about this one to be born who is from the ancient times, and his life will have implications to future times and ultimately to our peace. And it comes from a shepherd, from one who sees the strength in the Lord and finds his power in the name of the Lord. What I would love for you to end today with is this: a sense of wonder and anticipation of what God can do. He can take a little child of Bethlehem and bring you hope and anticipation of what he can do in your life. For those of you with little children, they are going to be looking at their presents, shaking them, dreaming, wondering. That spirit of wonder is what I'm really praying for you and for me. That we can look, because of what God has given in this child of Bethlehem, that I will be dreaming, anticipating good things from the shepherd who loves me, because of the strength of the Lord he provides in the name of the Lord. You know, I have another piece of this nativity set. It's a little lamb. It's cute. And biblically, this is us. And we don't know all the things that we're going to be going through. But as I was wrapping up my preparation, I was remembering a conversation I had with my wife. If I can take you back to right before I became a pastor at Shelter Rock Church. I'm in Illinois, and I am working at the church we were at, and I had a house very close to that church. So my wife was pruning a tree outside of her house, above our driveway. And as she's cutting things on this ladder, she slips, she falls, and she lands right on her bottom, and she immediately notices something bad just happened in her back. She sends my 4 or 5-year-old son to come running to the church to get me because she knows she can't even get up. And so my son runs to the church, and while he's running, there is somebody mowing the church lawn, and that person happens to be a fireman by day, and he realizes something's up. And so as I'm running to my house and my 5-year-old is running, and then that man starts running too, anticipating maybe we can help. And we find my wife on the driveway, unable to get up. Well, the fireman realizes we can't move her. We need to go through proper paramedics. They have the ambulance come. She's placed on a board. We take her to the hospital, and she has fractured one of her vertebrae. You know, in my mind, I'm thinking, what is going to happen? Am I going to have a wife who has a permanent lifetime disability? What does that mean? I have a little baby. I have a young son. I have 2 little girls. And I'm trying to figure what all this is going to happen. And I'm filled with anxiety. And here's what Michelle said to me when I saw her in the hospital. This is going to be interesting to see what the Lord has in store for us. And I'm like, wow. You're actually looking at this as an opportunity to see what God's going to do. And you know what? She was right. You see, well, I was looking at it as, oh my goodness, my wife is going to be a paraplegic. You know, I don't know what's going to happen. She was looking at like a present that she's about to unfold, and it's going to be wondrous, but she just doesn't know what it is yet. And so she's shaking it a little, and she's living in wonder and anticipation. Friends, what we need today is that spirit of Christmas wonder. That this baby born in Bethlehem is the exemplifying of the love that God gives us in the person of the Messiah, Jesus. And what does that love look like? A shepherd who will care for us. Somebody who has the strength of the Lord and teaches us to be strong in the Lord. And somebody who moves in the power of the name of the Lord. The wonder of Christmas. So, as we once again dream of Christmas, I think of myself as the little sheep who wants to have an anticipation that this Christmas, this year, could be another beautiful picture of the love we have received from God in the person of Jesus. God bless you and have a wonderful Christmas.